Takes more than guts to be a gangster. It takes good ideas. And I hope these ideas help you. Hey, what is up, guys? This is your mob boss, GangsterKT, and today we are going to get into depth with MSF optimization and the current meta and how I would be min-maxing right now, what teams I'm working on, etc. So this video series is called Glock Watch. This is my third one, and for those who don't know, this is a tribute and a play on an old content creator philosopher's stock watch, where he would analyze teams in terms of stocks and what has value, what's going up, what's going down. It was always my favorite video to watch and really is what kind of got me into theory crafting in this game. And I looked forward to it whenever it come out. So since he has since retired, wanted to again pay tribute and try and recreate the same information, and hopefully you find it helpful. So with that said, let's get into this. So first section, want to talk about the mob rules. So this is my approach to roster optimization. So for those who have seen Fight Club, the obvious rule number 1 is do not talk about the mob. Period. Enough said. Rule number 2, make your PvP teams as big as possible and your raid teams as big as needed. So as long as you're clearing the raids that your alliance is doing and maybe can clear that next level if you're getting ready to push, I like to focus on my PvP teams. That's where the incremental gains and their relative power to your enemy power is really important. So I think it's great to make those as big as possible, and that's where I focus my resources. Rule number 3 is to prioritize the newest characters. Draw a line and do not invest below it. So Doom, Omega Red, those guys I'm still using daily, but they're still in the mid 80 levels. It may be a mistake. They could be kind of the exceptions to this rule. But in general, I just stay focused on the newest characters because they're going to be the best. And if I have my newest characters where I want them, I usually save for the next newest characters. So I think that's very important. Rule number 4, identify the power on the teams and focus there. Don't just take everyone up equally. So I think a great example that with the Underworld team, if you took Taskmaster up, you could get about 90% of the value of that team just from him and do huge pump-ups on meta teams. So granted, if that's the case today with as big as teams are getting, they probably won't have the staying power, but it worked well for months and months and months, and I didn't spend any resources. I'm basically the other 4, Mr. Negative a little bit. So, instead of taking a team of 5 up to level 90 equally, figure out who are the 2 best characters on that team and take them up to 95 and the other 3 up to 85, just as an example. It'd be the same resources, but you'll get a lot bang for your buck and the team will perform much better if you really focus on the power. Rule number 5, right now, this is an update, but start using gold to help with other resource bottlenecks and specifically teal gear. So for months with the hoarding meta, gold was my bottleneck, and I was very deliberate with it. I still need gold, don't get me wrong. There's guys I could still level up, but I really am in pretty good shape with gold right now, and I'm able to keep up. What I'm not in good shape on is Mystic teal gear, Mutant teal gear, and so I'm looking for ways to try and increase my teal gear even at the expense of gold. So farming the teal gear nodes daily instead of farming the gold orbs is something I'm doing, and just trying to keep that in mind where your bottleneck is and really focusing there. Rule number 6, use resources with events in mind. So we don't have to hoard nearly as much as we used to, but if you still pay attention and know what events are coming, it's a chance to maybe get, just a reset worth of hoarding in to get that little competitive advantage. So those who watch these types of videos, hopefully, get advantage from the theory, but it's just another way to try and get one little step ahead, and you're going to be using the resources anyways. Rule number 7, right now, the mob is occasionally spending on the power new Toons. So for me, that's Toons like Vol, like Thor Infinity War. So I'm not spending on raid teams, with the exception being Vol, just because of how amazing Vol is everywhere. But I am spending a little bit right now, but just on the really power new Toons. The one I was talking about before that are, the 2 Toons on that 5-man team that you'd really focus on leveling. So I'm spending a little right now. Rule number 8, the meta changes quickly, so don't be stubborn, be willing to pivot. That's very important, and you can't just, if you had plans to max out a team 3 months ago, even if you're getting close, it may not be worth it anymore. Is Gamma still worth putting resources in? So be willing to change your plans, pivot, and always focus on the new meta. So that is it for the mob rules. All right, so next is gaining favor. The mobsters on the rise. So First off, have to touch on Vol. Have another video about Vol, but just the newest tune. It's a Scopely original character. Unbelievable stats, plus the passive giving 50% health and 25% damage is just unreal. And I think the coolest thing about Vol is it enables doing the Mystic Raid nodes with the older tunes and being able to go up probably as high as Incursion 1.5 based on some comments I got. Vol's going to be part of the Crucible and War meta for a long time, even if the Bifrost team is not part of those modes. So max Vol out immediately. That's probably my top recommendation I can give right now. Vol is an absolute beast. Number 2 is Thor Infinity War, and not saying he's the best character. Again, this is Mobsters on the rise, not necessarily the best. But I think when I got him to 5 red stars, it really enabled that Nowhere team more and allowed them to start performing because they're extremely survivable, especially with Cosmo and the heals and the debuff clears, buff clears, etc. But they really needed some more damage, and Thor is the 3rd or 4th highest damager in the game. He'll have offense up for his ult. Because of the Korg special, and it's a 700% piercing damage ult. So the special and ult damage from him is unbelievable, and he's definitely a character I think is worth investing big in. Number 3 is the Wakandan. So again, not the top investment choice, but with the Crucible cookie cutter changing, I think the incremental value of the Wakandans is going to be much more important. So right now, who cares if you take your Shuri up 5 more levels because MOE are just going to waste them. But when that automatic counter goes away, that incremental gains on Wakandans will be important again. So I would focus on the Wakandans just because of the crazy value that Nakia and Black Panther 1 million bring him War, and still great in Crucible. But I think they are actually on the rise, even though they're an older team, because the Crucible changes. And number 4 is Black Widow. So I have no plans or interest in the Infestation team. We'll talk about that later. But with the rework, Black Widow is a lot beefier now from a stat standpoint. And then the kit is still there. So I think we'll be using her as a similar speed gimmick as we've been using Fury, where she'll just go very early on in the match, put speed up with her special on your whole team, and that'll give you the speed advantage, which everyone knows is so important in a turn-based game. So I think we're going to find many plug-and-play uses for her. I'll probably take her to DD6, so she is one character on the rise. So let's talk about the other direction now. So the mobsters that we're pouring cement for, so they're about to go to the bottom of the river, so no need to invest in them. So first is the Horsemen also Rands, and that's kind of hard to say. We've been so focused on the Horsemen team for so long. But besides the Horsemen themselves, and maybe like the exception of Gambit or 1 or 2 exceptions, I don't think it's worth investing on the Horsemen team anymore at this point. So you have them T17 or close to that, level 90 because of that. You probably have Blue ISO 4, Blue ISO 5 on them. So besides that, what's needed for Apocalypse, or if you are going to take them into DD6, I think their glory days are behind them, and it's not worth investing anymore. Number 2 is the Eternals. So again, it's hard to say. I didn't think they'd ever make this list, but the Eternals are amazing. But they are starting to get power crept. And then with the Crucible changes, they aren't going to be needed or have that Room 3 bonus anymore that gives them a little extra staying power there. So they're still going to be used for months. They're still going to be amazing. But again, these are guys on the decline. So at this point, I would not put any more resources into Eternals unless, they add new Eternals down the road. I think that their current use right now is their swan song. And number 3 is the Rebirth. And the first thing I'll say is ignore this if you're struggling in the bio raid nodes and Incursion and you need a bigger Rebirth. They should be your priority if that is the case. But again, with the Crucible cookie cutter going away, and you can see a theme right now with how I'm prioritizing things, the Rebirth are going to lose significant value in that Room 6 and Cosmic Crucible defense. And I think they're going to be relegated to just being basically a raid team going forward, similar to Incursion. So they are so sustainable. And have the one-shot capabilities with Anti-Venom and Winter Soldier. But a huge part of that is that revive that they get. If you can just one-shot Carter, that match is so much easier. So, again, I think when that goes away, they're going to basically be a raid team, and that gets to the mob rule where you build them as big as needed, and then you stop and focus on other tunes. All right, so next I want to cover the Mafia recruits. So these are new members or members who have reworked themselves. So first off, let's talk about the Bifrost team. So I've touched on it already. They will be the best Mystic Raid team. There's no question. Scopely forces that with the new teams, and they're a lot of fun to play in raids because they dominate. but I don't need a Mystic Raid team right now, and that is again because of Vol. So I'm going to build the Bifrost team. They'll be needed for future raids. There's no question. They're a team that you pretty much have to invest in, similar to Incursion, similar to Rebirth. But I'm going to be very deliberate because the content I'm doing right now and the next couple pushes and Incursion for my alliance, I'm covered with Vol and Eternals and Morgan and Deathpool. So again, not going to rush it, going to be deliberate. I'll plug them in as I get them big. But maybe, just using them for the gold spending milestones daily to spend that 1,000,000 gold to get your 50 power cores, but doing it very deliberately and slowly. Second team to talk about is the Infestation, or as I like to call the Indigestion team. They're going to be a stomach ache on more defense. There's no question, and Dorky had a really good video highlighting that if you haven't seen it. But with how tight resources are for me, and even though I love War, my focus is going more to Crucible right now as far as just personal performance there. So I'm not looking at the Infestation team at all. Again, I think Black Widow could be an exception there, and Spider-Man Big Time will be great as a new character, there's no question. So I am planning on working on him, assuming there will be some plug-and-play capability in PvP modes there. But overall, I'm unfortunately just not going to worry about Infestation. I have most of the guys, level 65 to 75 and T13 range. I'm just going to throw them on more defense like that. It'll still take a pretty tough counter. And let it ride from there. So that's really all I have to say about them. I think it's just a chance to focus your resources elsewhere. Number 3, and he's not brand new anymore, but this guy is just a stud. He's showing off in the mob every day, so I wanted to highlight him, and that is Quicksilver. So my Quicksilver is 6 yellow stars, 5 red stars. And just cannot get over the use for him. So you guys who play competitive Crucible know, like with the Darkhold on defense with them or with the Rebirth on defense with them, he just changes the match and makes it so much more difficult in those defenses. And then you have him on offense, and he is just unbelievable with the 2 turns. You can use him kind of plug and play anywhere. I would definitely max him out if you haven't already and if you have the resources. Again, I think, taking him to level 95 will get you a lot more value than maybe investing in the Infestation team or investing in some of the Bifrost right now, because he is just an absolute stud. So my only lookout with him is he is dependent on the charges. And for a while, Silver Surfer was the only character that could remove those, but we are starting to see more, and I think that'll continue. I think we'll see more and more characters that can remove charges, and that could really mitigate Quicksilver's value. But, if you're using them on offense, you can choose who you're going against. You can make sure to avoid that. So I still think he is a recommendation to max out and be one of the best characters on your roster. All right, so next section, we are going to build the arsenal. So this is mainly advice on Red Star promotions, and I will say that my approach to Red Stars has changed drastically for 2 reasons. The biggest reason by far is that $20 offer about 2.5 months ago for all those gold promos that just completely changed that economy. And then also around the same time, we started getting less stars on new characters. So while I was getting more gold promos, I actually had fewer characters to spend them on, kind of in that cycle there. And so right now I'm sitting at over 700 gold promos. And again, I never thought I'd have that amount with the old economy. So I am being a little careful, though. I did a couple characters maybe for fun. But for the most part, I focus on the characters on the list below. And then again, I'm at 700 and I'm saving. So I have like Thor Infinity War at 6 red star. If whenever I get a 7th yellow, I'll probably take him up. I'll definitely take Kang to 7 red when I get his 7th yellow. But in general, I'm really focusing on the ones below that I don't have, but I do have most of them at this point. And then I'm saving. So, don't just feel like you're flush because of this and start blowing them. Next thing you know, you're going to be out again and back to the old economy. So I really want to stretch mine out as long as I can. So with that said, the top gangsters for gold promotions, and this is in order. Number 1 and number 2 are Kang and Spider Weaver. I think there is a huge delta between those 2 and between everyone else. I'll give Kang the slight nod, and that's because of the upcoming Crucible changes, and I think his incremental value will be more important for the reasons I've been talking about. It was Spider Weaver ahead of Kang on the list before, but again, Kang gets the number 1. But if you do not have those guys at the red stars equivalent to your yellow stars right now, go buy the red stars immediately. They are no-brainers. They're used everywhere and 2 of the best characters in the game. Number 3 is Fury, and I think he is a great recommendation. I have him at 7-star, and it's similar to what I was saying with Vol. Having Fury so big really enables my Invaders team to do really well in the skill nodes on the incursion and do what I need without having them that big. So I think my whole team's around 915k, and most of that is my 7 red star maxed out Fury. But they're killing it. They're doing everything I need. I can auto the boss node. So if I get up to higher incursions, I'll probably work on the rest. But Fury is huge. I'm using him in Crucible every day. I'm using him in War, so he's another no-brainer. Number 4 is Nakia, and I've always been obsessed with Nakia, but I still think, like I mentioned before, with Wakandans on the rise right now because the Crucible changes, with Nakia, destroying the Black Order and War, an important counter, and really just taking out those meta teams still. I have had her at 7 stars for a while, and I've been thankful every day. So I'd still think that's a no-brainer if you have the gold promos, and I would do Nakia. Number 5 and 6 were kind of tough because they're older characters, but Kestrel and Gambit, if you have the gold promos and you don't have those two at 7 red star, I still think they're worth doing. Kestrel is the original Scopely character, and if she ever gets to the point where she's power crept completely, I think they'll rework her and make her always viable. But she's still used daily for me, even though you can feel that power gone a little bit. She is unbelievable still. So I'd still do it. And then next is Gambit, and again, I think with the Crucible changes coming, we may start using Unlimited on offense. We may start just having different matches with Unlimited to where Gambit is such a huge part of winning that match. I think out of all the Horseman teams, he's kind of the single value best character besides the Horsemen themselves. So I think he is still worth doing with how important Crucible is. Next is Thor Infinity War. Like I mentioned before, when I got him to 5 red, it really started enabling that Nowhere team more, and his damage is extremely noticeable. So I'm basically going to take his red stars to however many yellow stars I have. Right now that's 5, but when I get him up to 6 and 7, I do have a 6 red, but I will buy that 7th. And lastly is Dagger. I wanted to have a character from the new Warriors team because of how important they are right now in the game. And it's hard to explain, but normally I'd focus on the newer Toons, right? And Dagger's a rework, which is great, but usually the newer Toons are still better. But with them, they may be better from an overall kit and team perspective, but the power of that team is really Dagger still, in my opinion. So Moonstone, applies the trauma, that's huge, or Firestar. I always get those two mixed up. So whichever one is on the new Warriors team. So applies that trauma in the bleeds. So having more red stars there would be great for the bleeds that then get spread and added by Deathpool. But in general, it's more kit-based things, in my opinion, with Gwenpool and Firestar Moonstone, whichever it is, the one with the mask, although they may both have masks, who knows. But the real power and the real damage on that team is still Dagger. So I think it's worth taking the Dagger to 7 if you haven't already, and have the other ones ahead of Dagger in the list done. So lastly, going to cover the top gangsters for dark promos. So this is in order. My first recommendation is probably going to be unpopular, but if I had a 6 red star Red Hulk and I had the dark promo credits, I would still take Red Hulk to 7 red star as my top priority. I think Red Hulk is still the best character in the game, although there's definitely a few also-rans out there right now with Kang, Quicksilver, Apocalypse, etc. Vol, but I still think that Red Hulk right now is the best. That battlefield effect is just ridiculously powerful. He can solo teams. He can almost solo raid nodes, even though I'm not using him in raids, but if I need him, he's always there. But the reason I wouldn't do this necessarily if you only have him at 5 red right now, I don't think that the 6 red star upgrade at only 10% is very valuable for 3,500 dark promo credits. So in general, I haven't been taking someone to 6 unless I plan to take them at 7. And even though Red Hulk's still my top recommendation, thinking 8,000 dark promo credits to take him to 6 and 7, I would struggle to make that kind of investment in a character that old, even though I think he is still the best. So that's just my opinion. If you put 6 red stars on him, you sure aren't gonna hate yourself for it. Even if you don't take him to 7, you're still gonna get value there. But if you're competitive, you're probably going against mostly 7 red stars at this point, and having him at 6, I don't know how different that is at 5. So just my recommendation there. Second choice would be 5 red star on Quicksilver, and then followed pretty closely by 5 red star on Nova. So if you're battling between those two, I do have a separate video explaining why I'd put Quicksilver first, but they're pretty close, and they're definitely the two I would do next. And then my fourth gangster that I'd recommend is Mr. Save. So if you have those ones ahead of them, unless you just have a crazy amount of dark promos or about to hit the cap where they'll go to waste, I would save at this point because, Quicksilver's going to have 6 and 7 down the road. Nova's going to have 6 and 7. I think Morgan, even though she's still amazing, she's just getting too old to use that valuable of a resource on. And same comments with Dormammu. So if you have enough, I did want to show my next recommendations would be Morgan, then Dormammu. But again, I'm just saving right now because I have a 7 Red Star Red Hawk, 5 Red Star Quicksilver, and Nova. So I am in full save mode until one of those characters gets an option to get more. Alright guys, so I hope that video was helpful today. I normally try to keep my videos 5 to 10 minutes, but this is kind of I want it to be my flagship video. It's everything I've learned over the past few months and studied in this game, kind of all wrapped into one set of recommendations. So I hope you enjoyed this. I really hope that this helped you. I give you my word that this is the best advice I have. All I have in this world is my balls and my word, and I don't break them for no one. Peace!